Okay, hello everyone. All right, so now that we've seen the if-else statements, let's see an example program with the if-else statement, right? So we know that we cannot divide when we're doing math. We cannot divide by 0. If we have two numbers, if we have a numerator and a denominator, the denominator cannot be 0. So let's just do a system.out.println statement and try to divide 2 by 0. Compile this and then run, and we get an error message. And over here you can see it says division by 0. This means division by 0. It's trying to say that you cannot divide by 0. This is what's called an exception, and we'll talk more about exceptions later on. But you cannot divide by zeros. But we can use if-else statement to kind of fix this problem. We are going to write a program that's going to ask the user to enter two numbers, a numerator and a denominator, the first number and the second number. But then the second number, which is our denominator cannot be equal to 0. So we can use an if statement to check on that second number and say, if that second number, or if our denominator is 0, then tell the user that, hey, your denominator cannot be 0. But if it's not 0, then go ahead and do the division. That means we can divide. So let's do that. Let's use an if statement to do that. So I'm going to take this down and delete this. And since we're going to be asking the user for input, we can either use the scanner class or the GOptionPane class to ask for user input. For this one, I'm just going to randomly select the scanner class to accept user input. And we know that in order to use this scanner class, we have to import it. So import java.util.scanner. We are importing the scanner class located in the java.util package located in the Java API. Okay. Now, with the scanner class, we have to go ahead and create a scanner object. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to create a class type, a class type variable. I'm going to call this keyboard. Keyboard is going to be a class type variable of type scanner that's going to store the memory address of a scanner object. Now I'm going to go ahead and create the scanner object. So new scanner. And we know that the scanner class has methods that converts the user's data to whatever we need it to other data types, let's say to strings or to integers. But then system.in, okay, kind of allows the user to type in something, but then it stores that value as byte info. But then we are going to give that byte info, okay, we're going to connect it with this scanner object that we are creating over here. And the scanner methods, the scanner class has methods that can convert that byte info, or basically the information that the user typed, which is byte info, into other types of data, right? So we have our class type variable, which basically stores the memory address of our scanner object. And then we're going to now go ahead and tell the user to enter a numerator, right? So I'm going to do that right now. So system.out.println, and I'm going to say, please enter the numerator. Now this is going to basically display this string to the user. Please enter the numerator. I'm going to use the scanner object keyboard, and I'm going to call the method .next. Well, let's deal with doubles. Okay, let's deal with doubles now. Keyboard.next double. Okay, now keyboard.next double is going to pop up some kind of text box, and it's going to allow the user to type in something, and whatever the user types is going to be converted to a double, and it's going to be returned. Okay, it's going to send it back to us. Okay, we'll talk more about methods in the future, but then for now, remember we briefly talked about it. Methods, once you're done doing what you're doing, sometimes they send back data to us. So it's going to allow the user to type in something. It's going to take whatever the user typed and convert it to a double and then return it to us. And when it's returning it to us, we need a place to store it. So I'm going to create a variable over here. Since it's returning a double, I need to create a double variable, and I'm going to go ahead and call this numerator. Oops, numerator, right, all right. And then I'll come over here, and then numerator is going to store whatever the next double method is returning. Okay, it's going to store it right here in numerator. So we have our numerator here. We are going to basically use the same format to ask for the denominator. I'm going to copy this whole thing and paste it right below it. Another message is going to be displayed to the user, but this time it's going to say, please enter the denominator. Okay, and then keyboard.next double is going to pop up some kind of text box and allow the user to type in something. Now, whatever the user types is going to be converted to a double, and it's going to be sent back to us. But this time, we're not going to store it in numerator, because numerator already has this value. So we need a place to store the denominator. I'm going to come up here and then create a variable, and I'm going to call it denominator. It's going to be a double, because we're dealing with doubles here. Denominator. I hope I spelled it correctly. All right. And so denominator is going to store the denominator that's been, sent by the next double method. So now we have our two variable values, numerator and denominator. Now we can go ahead and divide, but we know that we can't divide if the denominator is 0. So the user can give us a 0 here, and if we try to divide, we're going to get an error. So since we've learned about if-else statement, we can try to check to make sure that this denominator is not 0. If it's 0, we want to display a message to the user and tell the user that, hey, your denominator cannot be 0. And if it's not 0, go ahead and perform the calculation or perform the division. So we're going to create a if-else structure here. Okay, if-else structure. Okay, and we know that, just kind of space this out a little bit. This is where our Boolean expression is going to go. If it's true, if this whole Boolean expression here evaluates to true, then what's in this set of curly braces is going to run. Else, then what's in this set of curly braces is going to run. Okay. All right. So the first thing we want to check is if the denominator is equal to 0. It's exactly 0. So if denominator is equal to, now I'm using two equal signs to kind of compare. If I use one equal sign, I'm assigning. So I'm using two double equal signs to compare and ask and say, is what on the right equal to what on the left? And that's either going to be true or false. That's going to evaluate to true or false. So if the denominator, I didn't spell it correctly. All right. If the denominator is equal to the number 0, then we want to display a message to the user and say that, so system.out.println your denominator cannot be 0. Please run the program again and enter a valid value. A valid value meaning any number that's not 0, right? Okay, so if the denominator is 0, then it's going to run the statement and exit out of the if-else structure, because with this if-else structure, it's either what's in the if block is going to run or what's in the else block is going to run. If what's here, if the Boolean expression here is true, what's in the if curly braces is going to run. If it's not true, then what's in the else curly braces is going to run. And if one of them runs, it's going to exit. If the what's in the if curly braces runs, it exits out of the if-else structure. If what's in the else curly braces run, it exits out of the if-else structure. One of them runs, not both of them. Okay. All right. So if it's 0, display this message. Else, then we know that the denominator is not equal to 0. So we know we have a safe number. We have a safe denominator to work with. So now let's go ahead and do the division. And so let's divide and say the numerator divided by denominator is going to give us our answer, right? Now we need a place to store our answer. So let's go up here and declare another variable. And it's also going to be a double, right? Because you can get a double as an answer. So you need a double variable to hold the answer. So double, and I'm going to call it, let's call it result. So double result. Now result is going to store the result of numerator divided by denominator, semicolon. And once we have result stored in the variable here, let's go ahead and display it with a system.out, the println statement. And then we're going to say that numerator, right, divided by denominator is result. But we can use the values in the variables, themselves. So let's say something like numerator. Okay, we're going to concatenate it with a string, numerator space divided by and then a space, and then let's concatenate it with the denominator. So numerator divided by denominator, and then let's concatenate it with a string s space. Let's concatenate it with the result is result. All right, so numerator divided by denominator is result. This is when the denominator is not equal to 0. Now remember, if the denominator is equal to 0, this is going to run. It's going to display this to the user and exit out of the if-else structure. The else part won't run because this was true, and so it runs this part. Now if the denominator is not equal to 0, then we have a good number. We have a safe number, so go ahead and run the else portion of it. All right, so it's either 1, it's either this or this that's going to run based on this condition, whether the denominator is equal to 0 or not. All right, so let's test this and see what we have so far. So compile this. We have no errors. Let's run this. It says, please enter a numerator. I'm going to enter 3. And please enter a denominator. I'm going to enter not 0, but a good number, 7. And it says 3 divided by 7. Well, 3.0 because they're doubles, right? Let's just pull out a calculator here just to confirm it. Well, some of you can do it in your head, but let's just confirm it. So 3 divided by 7 gives us 0.42857, and we can see it here basically. All right, so our program was working, but let's try to divide by 0. Compile and then run. At first, when we tried to divide by 0, we got an error. We got an exception, which is an error that said you cannot divide by 0. But now we are checking first to see if it's 0, and if it's 0, we are not performing the calculation. We are displaying a message to the user instead. All right, so if it's 0, it runs the statement, and then it jumps out of the if-else statement from here and continues down to run any code that's below this if-else structure. So please enter the numerator. I'm going to enter 5. Denominator, I'm going to enter 0. Hit enter, and now it says your denominator cannot be 0. Please run the program again and enter a valid value. But then when I enter a denominator that's not 0, it runs this portion, this else portion of it. So if denominators go to 0, then you can display this message. If it's not equal to 0, then go ahead and do this. If it's true, if what's here is true, do this. If not, then do the else portion. If it's true, do this. Else, do this portion of it. All right. So this is an example of how you'd use an if-else statement to write the program, and we'll see more examples in the future. But this is just to kind of explain the concept more so you can get it. All right. If you have any questions, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. As always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next video. All right. Bye-bye.